Hi, welcome to the Gemara on Chet Amud Aleph. We're starting from the third Mishnah on that Amud. This video is going to be a review and also your homework, but it's not comprehensive. Some of this is based on concepts that we will have covered in class, and we'll also be reviewing some of this in class. But this video will suffice for review and for your homework. The Mishnah says, Ein ben zav hara eshte re'iyot, l'ra shalosh ela korban. There's no difference between a zav who sees two re'iyot. A zav is a man who has some kind of genital emission, and he sees this emission two times in this case. Either, Rashi tells us, either twice in one day or once each on 2 consecutive days. So there's no difference in that case and the case of a zav, again, a man with a genital emission who sees that emission 3 times, either 3 times in one day or once on each of 3 consecutive days. Ela korban, except for a korban, except that the man who sees the genital emission 3 times in a row has to bring a korban, and the man who sees the emission twice in a row does not have to bring a korban. Here's the Gemara: Hala inyan mishkav u'moshav u'sfirat shiv'ah zev v'zeh shavim. So it must be that in the case of Mishkav u'moshav, so in terms of the level of Tuma that they're at, and for counting 7 emission-free days, the two are equal. In other words, these two cases, whether he sees this genital emission twice or 3 times, they're at the same level of Tuma. They're mitameh Mishkav u'moshav, which is a high level of Tuma. It means they can make other things tameh just by sitting or lying down on them, but even without touching them directly. That's a high level of Tuma. So it doesn't matter whether you saw this emission 2 times or 3 times, you're at that level. And you need to count 7 emission-free days as part of the purification process, and that's true for both of these cases as well. Menahani mile. The Gemara has its first question. How do we know all this? How do we know the difference between the 2 and the 3? Meaning, it's going back to our Mishnah and asking how we know this. The Tanu Rabbanan, as we were taught in a Braita, Rabbi Simai said, Manah katuv shtayim v'karot tameh. Shalosh v'karot tameh. The pasuk named or counted 2 and called it tameh, and counted 3 and called it tameh. Meaning in the psukim in Vayikra, which we will have already seen at this point, in Vayikra Tet Vav, Bet and Gimel, it says the word Zav twice in Bet and says that he's Tameh, and then in Gimel it says it 3 times and says that he's Tameh. So they're both called Tameh, so they must be equal in terms of their level of Tuma. Ha-Ketzad, how does this work? Shtayim l'Tumah, v'shalosh l'Korban. So what the psukim mean is that 2 times makes you tameh. You're already tameh after seeing this emission 2 times, and what the 3rd time does is it makes you also obligated in the korban. Ve'emar, it's kind of like we had before with ve'ema. This is an objection. Ve'emar, and I will say, shtayim l'tumah v'lo l'korban, shalosh l'korban. Shalosh l'korban v'lo l'tumah. Sorry. Maybe I'll say, okay, seeing 2 re'iyot, seeing this emission twice makes you tameh, but you don't have to bring a korban. And seeing this emission 3 times means you have to bring a korban, but you're not actually tameh. Maybe that's a conclusion you could have had based on this pasuk, or these 2 psukim. Amarta ad shalosh ra'ashtayim. But you said, meaning this is the resolution, the response to the objection, until you've already seen 3 times, you've seen 2. Meaning it doesn't make sense to have to say that twice you're tameh, but 3 times you're not tameh, because 2 comes before 3, and you'd already be tameh by that point. So that objection doesn't make any sense. Ve'emar, and here's another objection, shtayim l'korban v'lo l'tumah, shalosh af l'tumah. Maybe seeing this emission twice makes you have to bring a korban, but doesn't make you tameh, and the 3rd one, or seeing it the 3rd time, that's when the tumah kicks in. We could have argued that. Lo salkadaitach. You should not think this. The samach daled here, salkadaitach. Don't think this. Titania, because we learned in a breita, and this is another quote from. This starts with a pasuk. It's another quote from Vayikra. V'chiper alav hakohen lifnei Hashem mizova. The kohen will atone for him from his zav state. Right, the kohen will help him get out of his zav state. This means, according to the Breita, miktzat zavin mevi'in korban, or miktzat zavin ein mevi'in korban. Some zavim do bring a korban, and some do not, because the word mizovo, it sounds like some of the people who are zav bring a korban, and some don't. Ein mevi'in korban. Haketzad, how does this work? Ra'ah shalosh mevi, shtayim eino mevi. So, as we've said before, if he sees this emission 3 times, he brings a korban. If he sees this emission only twice, he does not bring a korban. Oh, eino ela ra'ah shtayim mevi, ra'ah shalosh eino mevi. Or maybe it could be, maybe another way to interpret this is, if it's only some zavim who have to bring a korban, so maybe the way it's supposed to be is that if he sees this emission twice, he brings a korban, but if he sees it 3 times, he doesn't have to bring a korban. Amarta ad shelo ra'ah shalosh ra'ah shtayim. No, that's not going to work, because you've already said, or you would say, again, until he hasn't seen 3, he's seen 2. Meaning 2 comes before 3, he's going to see twice before he can see a 3rd time, so that makes no sense that he would bring a korban after 2, but not after 3. At the point at which he's seen the 3rd time, he's already chayav in a korban. Doesn't make sense. That's the Gemara up till there arguing about how to understand this first breita of Rabbi Simai. I'm going to put that in red also. So that's the Gemara works on understanding that. Now the Gemara is going to try to put together some of the information that it had so far. We've dealt with 2 psukim, or 2 sets of psukim. The psukim that Rabbi Simai quoted, or referred to, he didn't really quote them, that's Tet Vav Bet and Gimel, the ones where Zav is mentioned 2 times and then 3 times and then referred to as Tameh. And then this one, V'chiper alav hakohen lifnei Hashem mizovo, which gave us the limud from the word mizovo. So from having it 2 times and then 3 times, we learned that it's tameh in both cases, but the difference is that after 3 times you have to bring a korban. And mizovo teaches us something very similar, that only some zavim have to bring a korban. So the Gemara now wants to know, why do we need both of these psukim? V'itzirich de Rabbi Simai, we need that which Rabbi Simai taught us. V'itzirich mizovo, and we need this mizovo teaching also. We need both of these psukim. Ti'im de Rabbi Simai, because if I just learned from Rabbi Simai, Hava Amina, I would have said, or I would have thought, Kikushian. I would have thought, like our question, like our previously stated or implied question, meaning I would have said, okay, 2 times is the lower tuma level, and 3 times is the higher tuma level, right? I wouldn't necessarily have known that the difference was in terms of korban. I would have thought it was a lower tuma level versus a higher tuma level. Kamash malan mizovo. So therefore we learn mizovo. Mizovo teaches us that some zavs bring a korban and some do not. And so then putting that together with the 2 times, 3 times, we can figure out that the distinction between seeing 2 riyot and 3 riyot is whether or not you bring a korban. The mizovo, and if it was mizovo, if we only had the limud from the pasuk of mizovo, lo yadana kama riyot, we wouldn't know how many riyot, meaning mizovo only teaches us that some zavim have to bring a korban and some don't, but we wouldn't have known who was who or how to decide. So kamash malan de Rabbi Simai. Therefore, it comes to teach us that of Rabbi Simai, right? Therefore, so now we know Rabbi Simai teaches us about the 2-3 distinction, and mizovo teaches us that the difference between the 2 and the 3 is whether or not you bring a korban. Okay. Moving on in the Gemara. The hashta. And now, De'amart mizovo l'drasha, v'chi yeter hazav mizovo, mai darasht be. Okay, so now that we've said that, this mizovo comes to teach us something, it comes for a drasha, v'chi yeter hazav mizovo, mai darasht be. So what about this other pasuk, this later pasuk, of chi yeter hazav mizovo? Again, you'll have all of these pasukim. We're going to be looking at these in class. So if you can learn out mizovo, the pasuk mizovo, in one pasuk, what does it come to teach us in the other pasuk where it says v'chi tar hazav mizovo? Okay, what do we learn from it there? Hahu mi ba'ile. That one is necessary. L'kedetanya, for that which we learn in a brayta. V'chi tar hazav l'kashiv sok mizovo. So these words, v'chi tar hazav, when the zav becomes pure again, that teaches us the kashiv sok mizovo, when he stops having his flow, having this emission problem. Velo mizovo vinego, and not from his zav and his nega. So if let's say this guy has a double form of tuma going on right now, let's say that it's not only that he is a zav, but he also has tzarat. So chiyuter hazav mizovo. It's only that he's done with his this genital emission. He can now start counting his 7 emission-free days. He can start the purification process, even though he hasn't become purified. He hasn't stopped having his tzarat problem yet. So that's what that part of the pasuk teaches us, that he only has to be purified from the zav part. It's okay if he has other forms of tuma. Mizovo v'safar, the second part of the pasuk, limed al zav bal shtei ru'iyot shete'un sfirat shiva. This teaches us that a zav who's only seen 2 ru'iyot requires counting 7. And again, we want to prove, going back to our mission, we want to be able to say that a zav who sees 2 times and a zav who sees 3 times both count 7 days, because that's the assertion of the Gemara about the Mishnah. Right? The Gemara says that le'inyan sfirat, right? Le'inyan mishkav u'moshav and sfirat shiva, the 2 are the same. So we want to prove that. So the Gemara says, well, that's what we learn from this second part of the pasuk, from this mizovo. It teaches you that they're the same. Bal shtei riyot, bal shalosh riyot. Whether the zav sees 2 or 3 times, either way, he has to count the 7 emission-free days. V'halo dinhu. But isn't this logical? Meaning we shouldn't have needed a pasuk to teach us this. Isn't this logical? Im mitameh mishkav u'moshav. If it is mitameh, if he's mitameh mishkav u'moshav, if he's at this high level of tuma, lo yehet ta'un sfirat shiva? Question mark, exclamation point. Won't he require counting 7? Meaning, you could just figure it out that anyone who's at that high level of tuma, if they're the same for level of tuma, they must be the same for counting shiva. You shouldn't need a pasuk to tell you this. No, the Gemara says it's actually not so logical. Shomeret yom keneged yom tochiach. A shomeret yom keneged yom case will prove it. Shomeret yom keneged yom, a case where a woman is what's called a zava ketana. She's only seen blood once or twice in her ziva days, so she doesn't have to count 7 blood-free days. She only has to keep a day of this tuma, but she is mitameh mishkav u'moshav ve'ina tu'una sfirat shiva. She is mitameh mishkav u'moshav. She is at this high level of tuma, but she does not have to count 7 blood-free days, meaning there is such a thing as a case like this, so we wouldn't have been able to figure it out logically, and so we did need the pasuk to teach us that a zav who had 2 re'iyot is at this level of tuma and also counts 7 blood-free days. Ve'af ata al titma al zeh, and you shouldn't be surprised by this. She'af al pi shemitameh mishkav u'moshav lo yehet ta'un sfirat shiva. You shouldn't be surprised that there's a case of someone who, in this case the zav, right, is mitameh mishkav u'moshav. He's at this high level of tuma, and he still doesn't need the counting of the 7 days. Talmud Lamar, this is why it teaches us mizovo. This pasuk again, mizovo. Mizovo v'safar. Miktzatzovo. Some zavim, right? Meaning not every case of zav, but some cases of zav. V'safar, and he counts, limed al zav bal shtei re'iyot, shete'un sfirat shiva. The word v'safar there means that someone who's only seen this emission twice still needs to count the 7 days. Amar le Rav Papa la Abaye. So Rav Papa says to Abaye, Maishna hai mizovo demarbebe zav bal shtei re'iyot, umaishna hai mizovo demima et be zav bal shtei re'iyot. What's the difference between this mizovo, which includes marbe, increases or includes within it a zav who sees 2 emissions, and what's the difference between this mizovo, the second mizovo, that excludes a zav who sees 2 times? In other words, the words mizovo in the 2 different psukim are used for opposite purposes. One includes a zav who sees twice, and the other excludes a zav who sees twice. Amar le, so he says back to him, right? Abaye says back to Rav Papa, Isal kadatzcha hailama utehu da'ata lishto kramine. Basically, he's saying you're right. Like if it comes the first time to include, if it comes the second time to exclude, it should always come to exclude. But if you would think that this one comes to exclude, lishto kramine, the pasuk should just be quiet, because you would assume anyway that it wouldn't need that it wouldn't be necessary. So you would have assumed that this was an exclusion of the shtei re'iyot. So if it just wanted to exclude it, it didn't have to mention it. If it's mentioning it already, it must be including it. V'chi tema, and if you would say, ache midina shomer yom keneged yom tochiach, you would say, well, this just comes logically, right? You shouldn't need a pasuk to prove this again, because the shomer yom keneged yom proves this. Right? The shomer yom keneged yom proves that that you can have a case where you are at this high level of tuma but don't have to count 7. B'chi tema, and if you'll say haimi baile mizovo v'lo minugo, it's necessary for mizovo v'lo minugo. Sorry, I don't mean to put quotes there. Right? Again, this limud that we had before, that it means he's purified just from his zav, but not from his tzarat. Im ken lichtov kra v'chi ter hazav. If so, it could have just said when the zav becomes purified. It didn't have to add the word mizovo. V'lishtok, and enough. It didn't have to add the word mizovo. Mizovo, the word mizovo, lamali. What is it doing for me? Literally, why do I need it? Limed al zav bal shtei re'iyot shete'un sfirat shiva. This teaches us about a zav who has seen the emission twice, that he does require sfirat shiva. Essentially, what we come back to in the end is we prove that they are in fact the same, that the zav with 2 re'iyot and the zav with 3 re'iyot it's the same it's the same for the counting of 7 days, and they're the same for mitzaneh, mishkav, and moshat. They're on the same level of tuma. What I want you to do for this part of the homework is just to take the psukim, I've already given them to you on a sheet, and indicate what we're learning from each pasuk. Go through the Gemara and make sure you can match the limud with the pasuk. So, for example, you need to know the v'chi tar hazav, which pasuk that matches to, and what they're learning for it. And it could be multiple things, which is fine. You can indicate all of those things and the way that it goes back and forth. But I think the most important thing here is not to get lost in the psukim. So I want you to do that work of matching the Gemara to the psukim. Okay, we'll stop here.